Hi everyone and welcome back. Welcome to my new playlist, and in this new playlist I'm going to cover Next.js. Next.js is, you can say, a framework which is helping us with server-side rendering with React. Okay, so you might have already done little bit of server-side rendering with React or with Angular, that is called Angular Universal. React also supports server-side rendering, and it has its own library where you can render the component from the server side by running a simple Node.js server using Webpack. Okay, so in this whole playlist, our focus will be on what Next.js is, how it is helping us to build a server-side application, server-side rendered application. Okay, so you might have already familiar with the client-side application using Create React app, right? So what we do is we spin up a simple React application, then we host this application somewhere on the cloud front S3, and then we are able to see the content on the browser. Okay, so in this we will see what is the difference between a client-side rendering which we are doing with a Create React app and server-side rendering which we will do with Next.js app. Okay, so first of all, a little bit about me. I have like 8 years of experience working with JavaScript since last 6 years and working on different framework, which is, you can say, like anything and everything in JavaScript I have worked on. Okay, so in this course we are going to talk about Next.js in depth. Okay, so first we will talk about what Next.js is, how to get started with it. Every framework now has a CLI tool like Angular CLI, Vue CLI, Create React app. Similarly, the Next also provide us a CLI so that we can spin up a simple application. Then we will talk about the folder structure of a Next.js app, how to create a pages, how to create a routing, how to do the dynamic loading of component, how to create a dynamic routes, right? And how to style your component. Okay, how the code splitting and rendering is working with the Next.js. Okay, then we will talk about how the Next.js server-side rendered app can render the data which is coming from external interface like API. You might be hitting some API, doing some authentication, authorization, getting some data from the APIs like GitHub users, and then you are rendering it. So there is a different set of lifecycle methods which we have to use if we wanted to make an external API call. Then we will write a simple blog application which will have session based cookies. We will write login and register route. We'll talk about nested routing, dynamic routing, and custom 404 page. We will see how we can have a search engine optimization with this server that rendered pages, because now we have a freedom that you can override some default head tags like metadata tags for each and every page, so that the Google engine crawler can crawl those pages and can make our site search engine optimized. That is not possible that in simple Create React app or React app which we write, because that is single page application, only one index page is getting rendered and it is doing an internal routing and just navigating to a different pages. So Next.js is a advantage is you can have a search engine optimization SEO capability. And then we'll talk about how to do the API integration with the help of these different helper methods like get, static, props, and all. We'll talk about CSS modules, because in Next.js we use CSS modules to add on some styling for our HTML, right? So post CSS, CSS modules, SAS modules we will be creating. And first thing which we will talk about is the difference between client-side rendering and server-side rendering. Why we need server-side rendering in a particular use case? Why can't we just write a simple React application with this basic lifecycle methods which I have already covered in the full playlist? Now, what is the need of Next.js, right? So there we will identify the difference, that what is client-side rendering, what is server-side rendering, and how they are different from one another. Okay, so I will say let's get started with this brand new playlist about Next.js. I will be covering a lot of demos, and I'm targeting at least 30 to 40 videos on this playlist. So stay tuned. Thanks everyone. Hi everyone. So Let's try to identify the difference between client-side rendering and server-side rendering in this video. In the previous video, we just talked about the basic introduction about Next.js. So what is client-side rendering and what is server-side rendering, right? And we will try to identify what Next.js is trying to solve for us, okay? So this is server-side rendering. What happens with server-side rendering is server is sending ready to be rendered HTML page to the browser. Okay, so it has all the required things which need to be rendered on the browser, and browser render the page directly, and then that page is directly viewable on the UI. A JavaScript still need to be downloaded and executed. So then browser downloads the JavaScript, okay, and then browser execute React, and your now page is now interactable. Okay, the only difference here is the server is sending ready-made HTML to be rendered. Okay, it's not like you are sending JSX and then it is getting compiled and then all these things. Server is sending ready to be rendered HTML. So whenever that document is ready, you start seeing the page on the browser. That is the difference, right? And then it download the JavaScript, it will interpret, it will execute the React code, and it will make your page interactable. So your page is interactable only at the fourth phase. Here you can, in the second phase, you can start looking into the screen. You can see, okay, UI is building up, and you can see UI, but interaction is happening only in the phase 4. Okay. Similarly, if you talk about the client-side rendering, the only thing is here is the delay, because server is not sending ready to be rendered HTML. You are getting the artifacts JavaScript, then HTML, then CSS. All these artifacts you are getting. You are not getting HTML, you are just getting the bundle.css, bundle.js file. So browser need to first download all the JavaScript and CSS files. Once that browser download happens, browser downloads the JavaScript, first it downloads CSS and all, then browser execute React code, right? Now because you downloaded the React, all the libraries from the Webpack bundle, which is having all JavaScript code in a single bundle or maybe a multiple bundles. Okay, then browser has now everything, it has downloaded it, now it start executing it, and now your page is becoming visible, and it is also interactable because now JavaScript also executed, React also executed. So the only difference between both these approaches, you can see in the second approach your page is interactable and viewable only at the fourth phase, but here your page is visible from the second phase, but interaction you can do only at the phase 4. But that is a difference, right? You can start seeing what is coming up on the page. Here you are downloading a lot of things, JavaScript, HTML, CSS, and then your page is becoming visible or interactable at the phase 4. Okay, so that is the major difference with the client-side rendering and server-side rendering. Now you can see pros and cons of server-side rendering is, in server-side rendering, search engine can crawl your site for better search engine optimization, right? Cons is you are making a frequent request for every, whenever you are switching to a next page, you are making a request to another page, downloading the content, right? So overall slow page rendering is happening, right? And rich UI interaction is not happening at the early phases. That is happening only once you downloaded the HTML, JavaScript also downloaded and has been executed, right? So client-side rendering, rich site interaction, fast website rendering after initial load. The only difference is in client-side rendering, initially it will take time, but once it is executed, once it has downloaded the content, it will execute and it will make things available and interactable both together, right? So cons of client-side rendering is the low search engine optimization if not implemented correctly, right? Initial load might require more time because we are loading JavaScript styles, all these things together, right? So in most cases it requires an external library to optimize all these things, like you will be doing a split chunking, you will be creating a split chunks of CSS and JavaScript and trying to optimize the initial load of your page using like dynamic loading of the modules, split chunking where you are creating a multiple chunks for each and every page and then loading what is required on the home page. But the difference is this: in server-side rendering, you are able to see everything initially and page start becoming interactable at the fourth phase. But when you want to show the content to the user in the early phase, server-side rendering is good enough, and search engine optimization, if there is a need, then Next.js is a good choice. I mean, you can also look at the other libraries. If you talk about Angular Universal is there. React also provides some kind of a support. But when you have this Next.js framework which is dedicatedly doing that thing, then it is making our things more comfortable, right? There is another thing is a Gatsby, right? Gatsby is actually static site rendering. Now it is enhancing and it is evolving much. So that is also right good candidate for server side rendering of your markdown template or some static template. Okay, so here in this video we are going to talk about these things. Okay, so Next.js is solution for running React application server side. It also makes React development very simple. Some core features are like, okay, server side rendering, automatic code splitting and lazy loading, built-in CSS support, and hot reloading. Okay, these are some of the features of Next.js which is providing. Okay, you don't need to plug in a separate Node.js server and separate React app and then do the server side rendering. You just use Next.js and you just need to write a simple React code, React components. Okay, and your task is done. Okay, so let's get started from the next video, how to write a basic application in Node.js, in Nest.js. Okay, we'll start writing a simple blog and portfolio application in Next.js, and we'll talk about the routing and all these different aspects. Hi everyone and welcome back. So in this video, let's get started with Next.js. We will do the installation and setup, which is very easy. Before that, we'll talk about one simple Next.js application. So I was checking this application and this is Next.js server-side rendered application. And you can see on the index page what all things it is downloading on the page. You can see all the meta tags for search engine optimization it is rendering. Each and every meta tag, some meta tags for the Facebook attributes, title, description, image, Twitter card information. Okay, then you can see in the bottom it has server side rendered HTML and even the CSS also. So whenever the browser interprets this document, it start building it because it has everything what it needs. It has styles and it has JavaScript also in this page somewhere in the bottom. So I just try to format this. You can see the server side rendered HTML. So if HTML is coming up, CSS is coming up in the same page, then you can see the initial rendering will be faster. You can start seeing the page. You can start seeing the building of the page and you can see, okay, content is appearing. Now in the bottom, you can see the JavaScript, right? So initially you will see the styles, you will see the HTML and you will start seeing the page getting built, right? On the initial phase, like in some particular milliseconds. Then it will download this JavaScript, runtime JavaScript, which is main bundle, common bundle, webpack bundle, which are Next.js final bundle files, and it is async loading, right? We are using async tag here, so it will just defer these loading of these JavaScript files. It will not become a blocker in the critical path of web page rendering. You can see async is being used. So the JavaScript will execute, will download it and then execute, and then your page will become interactable in the final phase, not in the initial phase. In the initial phase, you will just see the page is getting appearing. So you can see the page start appearing initially. You can see the server-side rendering is so much faster here. The page is appearing and then it's just a simple page, just an HTML, right? Now coming back to the installation and setup. So basic things you need is you just need a one VS Code editor, Node.js installed on your system. That's it. You can get started. And we can use npx. You no need to install any module globally. Npx create next app, sorry. So create next app and here you can actually create a simple application. If you wanted to do a manual setup, just create a package.json and install Next, React and React DOM. We are using React and React DOM, React framework with Next to do the server side rendering. And then in the script tag, just to Next dev, this will start your server. Okay. so that we will see. And then you can start creating your basic components. Like this is home page component. The component we are going to create is same as what we were doing in React. Okay, the only things which will change is the routing in Next.js is different from the create React app we were doing. We were using React router DOM. Here it will be using Next router. Okay, some other library. Similarly, for making an API call, getting some external data, we were using these lifecycle methods in the functional component or class-based component. Things will be a bit different here. We will be using some different set of methods. Okay, so here you can see a CLI application also you can use. npx next touch, and you can actually create a basic application. Next build profile. So we'll start with the basic application, how to get started with this. Okay, and then what we just need to do is in the pages folder we just need to start creating the individual components like about component, home component, contact component, and Next.js is capable of linking all these on different routes. Okay, you will create about, contact, all these pages, and then you will be able to link them together. Okay, so getting started, we can just simply do this. Npx create next tab. Okay, so here let me zoom this a little bit. So we can just simply use this. So create next tab will help us to, what is your project name? Okay, so let's say okay, so we need to change it. And then you can see it is installing these three dependencies only initially: Next, React, React DOM, and Next, right? And your application will start. We'll just do, it is also installing all the required packages, and it will give us the basic skeleton of the folders. Then we just need to do npm run dev or yarn dev. That will just start the Next.js server. Okay, this will take time, so let's see this in the next video. Thanks everyone. Hi everyone, so let's start building our first Next.js application. Okay, this is very basic, and I hope you will get the basic concepts about server-side rendering, how we are creating the multiple pages, and how we are linking them through the Next.js router link. Okay, so we have already created a simple basic application, Next.js npx create React app, or you can install manually. And then we just need to do npm run dev. Okay, I did this somewhere. So in last video we created this basic application, then we can just do npm run dev. So what it will do is it will start the Next.js server. And what all things will happen when you are actually starting this application or whenever you are building it. So it is started the server on 3000, right? Now if you see what will happen when you do npm run build, I think this should be a command, next build. So it will create a build. It is just going to create a production build for us that will be available in this folder structure. So you can see here we can keep styles. Here we will maintain all our pages like contact, home, about, whatever the pages you wanted to have. This public where you wanted to put your static artifacts. Okay, rest is package JSON and your readme file. Now if I just see what all things I have now, you can see .next folder is created, right? When you do the build, and what this .next folder is having, it is having everything which you have built. Let me just make it a little small. Yeah, now you can see in the .next folder, you can see all the other things: build manifest, cache, routes manifest, server, and all, right? If you just go into deep, you can see all the other artifacts. So it is just generating its own case cache and all the pages, right? These are all default pages which Next.js is creating. You can see app.js and all, right? It's actually compiled version of a page. Let's go back outside from this folder. Okay, so when you do npm run dev, it actually builds the project for us. So it will start running the application on 3000. We will see what it is. Okay, now we have seen these pages and all. Now you can actually open the particular page and see what code is written there. You can see it is very basic React component export, default, function, home, right? And then you are actually using CSS modules, and you are actually applying the styles like this, and rest all is your HTML content, getting started content, the default page which Next.js provides. Okay. Now, what is the folder structure look like is something like this. This is .next folder is created, which contains the build and the library to start the server. Components, all the custom components we are going to build will go here. Pages, all the app level routes like home, contact, about, profile, settings, all these pages will go there. So whatever the file you are creating inside pages will become indirectly a route. Okay, then we have package.json. So this is the basic. Now what we need to do is we can create other components, like pages can have a home, index.js, right? We'll just create a simply files under the pages, and that will become indirectly a route. Like you wanted to have a route in the application, something like pages index.js. So what you will do is go to your pages directory and create home directory and put index.js there. It will indirectly become a Next.js route. Okay, that can be hosted on your application. Okay, so if I just talk about, do I have this? This is already a simple application I have, right? I think we can just run our own application and see. So are we running our application? No. So let's run that. Npm run dev. So this should start our application on port 3000. Okay, compiled successfully. Then it is building the page, and here is our Next.js app. Now if you try to inspect it, this is just a hello world auto-generated code. Now if you just try to see what all things we have captured from server-side rendered application, this localhost, if you just try to see this page, let me format this. You can see all the HTML is being rendered, and in the bottom somewhere we have these JavaScript files, right, which will be loaded. Right, so this is how our page is getting loaded, and here we can also check the timer. I mean, how much time this particular document page is getting rendered, and in how many milliseconds our page is getting visible to the user. We can just check the timeline. Okay, so this is the basic Next.js application. Now you can actually do one thing is start creating the pages inside a pages directory, and that will automatically link to the routes here. Okay, like if you just create a home index.js, like home, if you just create an index.js inside a home, then it will go there. Currently there is no home, so it is showing the 404 route. Okay, this page could not be found. Okay, so let's start building our application.